Hi, everyone. Welcome to Healthy School Meals for All, Lessons Learned and Reviewing Progress to Date, hosted by the Food Research and Action Center. I'm Steve Hayward, Communications Manager at FRAC. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few brief housekeeping items. We expect this webinar to run about 60 minutes. We are recording the presentation and will send the recording and slides in a follow-up email. Closed captioning is available. To turn captions on, select Show Captions in the bottom taskbar and choose English as the spoken language. At the end of the presentation, there will be time for questions and answers. To ask a question, please use the Q&A tab in the bottom taskbar. We'll also be asking for your participation in the chat today. With that, I'll pass it off to Alexis Bylander, Senior Policy Analyst at FRAC. Take it away, Alexis.
Great. Thanks, Steve. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad that you were able to join today's webinar about healthy school meals for all. And I really see today as an opportunity to provide a refresh on this issue. So the target audience for today's webinar is anybody that is new to the issue of free healthy school meals for all, or is somewhat familiar with the issue, but there has been so much activity on this over the last couple of years. And for anybody who just needs kind of a reset or a review of what has been going on, this webinar is for you. And as I was putting together my slides, I was thinking, is refresh the right word here that I'm going for? And so I actually looked it up, and other words that get to the same concept are reminder, review, energizer, and boost. And I thought, yes, that's exactly like what I want today to be, particularly the energy and the boost, because this is such an exciting issue area, and there is so much work being done around this on across the country, and it's an exciting time to be a part of any type of school meals work. So it's going to be fun to go through all of this today. So what we'll be covering is an issue overview of healthy school meals for all, a look at state and federal legislation on this topic, talk a little bit about how to start a campaign if your state doesn't already have one, and then some lessons learned and a look at implementation in the states that have healthy school meals for all policies. And then we'll have time for just a few questions at the end from all of you. So, issue overview next. All right, so just to start at the very beginning here, when we talk about free healthy school meals for all, we're talking about providing a free breakfast and lunch to all students in schools, regardless of their household income. This is a photo of my youngest daughter with school breakfast on the first day of pre-K, and it is a meal that we would eat at home, and it's food that kids love to eat. She has, in this picture, milk, Cheerios, a cheese stick, and a banana, and the quality of school meals and the benefits that come from having kids eat them are just really great. So next. I have found working on healthy school meals for all over the last couple of years that this is really an issue that brings people together. Campaigns that have already started involve teachers, students, parents and PTAs, school nutrition professionals, administrators, anti-hunger advocates, health organizations, unions, farm to school, the list goes on and on. In many of the states that have healthy school meals for all coalitions, it is not uncommon for them to have over 100 or 200 participants, because this is an issue that just seems to resonate with people so much. So in the chat, I would love to know, what stakeholder group are you a part of that brings you to this webinar today? And I won't have a chance to look through all of it until after today's webinar, but you can get a sense of who is with us today. And I'd love to look through that information later this afternoon. So I am sure that all of you can think of the benefits that would come along with serving free meals to all students as part of the traditional school day. But here are the ones that at FRAC we reference the most. Ensuring that all students are hunger-free and ready to learn. Reducing any stigma that may exist in the cafeteria around participating in school meals. Ending the problem of school meal debt, which is a significant problem for families and for schools. Easing administrative burdens, supporting innovative service models, and advancing racial equity by ensuring that all students have the focus and energy and nutrition that they need to be successful during the school day. Now, I wanted to dive into the benefits a little bit more with some more anecdotes and kind of nuance too. So, I really like to focus on the fact that we need all kids showing up at school ready to learn and having the energy and the focus that they need to learn throughout the school day. And last year, I was talking to someone who I was meeting for the first time. She was a pre K and kindergartner teacher of 13 years. And I told her what issue I worked on. And she said, it just makes so much sense to have the meals be free for everyone because it only takes one hungry, dysregulated kid who can't focus to disrupt a whole classroom. So even if someone says, this issue doesn't apply to me, like my kids eat at home or I'm able to pay or pack meals for my kids at school, we really all benefit when everybody is showing up to school ready to learn and ready to get the most out of their day. Next, we are really in a situation of just some impossible choices in a lot of school cafeterias across the country that don't have healthy school meals for all policies. And that is kids will go through the cafeteria line, they'll get to the point of service, and they won't have money in their account to cover the meal. And this is when the impossible choices start. So the school nutrition professional can either deny them the meal, which is heartbreaking. Maybe they'll serve them an alternate meal, which can be very stigmatizing. They can let them go through the line and accrue debt, which then can become a problem for families and schools down the road. Or I have heard many situations and stories of teachers or school nutrition professionals jumping in and paying for kids' meals out of their own pocket. And while that is incredibly admirable and compassionate and nice, it is also not a system-wide solution. It's not sustainable, and it's not fair to ask employees in schools to address this problem themselves. So we know that we can do better, and I believe that Healthy School Meals for All is the answer. Another thing that we'll hear in opposition to this policy sometimes is that children in need already receive free meals. And while it is true that there are lots of children that already receive free school meals, the way that the school meal program is structured, or meals at a reduced price, it is also true that the income eligibility criteria for free meals is very low. And there are many children in need who are not currently eligible. And to give just an example, a family of 3 this school year would have to have an annual income of less than $32,000, $318 to qualify. And for many of us in most places in this country, that is a very low income. And if you are just a couple of dollars above that, you likely still need some support at school too. Next. Another thing we'll hear is that we shouldn't pay for meals for children that come from wealthy households. And what I like to say in response to that is we don't know what is going on in individual homes. There can be a lot of reasons that people that we think should be able to provide meals for their children may not be able to. Some examples include medical bills, mental health issues, grief. The list goes on. And we don't know what's going on in homes. And if it was about something insignificant, we could just let it go. But allowing children to go hungry at school should never be the result. And by simply offering free meals to all students, we can resolve this issue. Another thing to mention is the idea that meals really should not be means tested at school because we don't do that with any part of the school day that is critical for success. Just like teachers and textbooks and technology are available to all students, so should meals that help kids focus and learn. Example of this is oftentimes schools will make available, Chromebooks or iPads for students or send them home on bad weather days or school breaks. And we don't ask parents, are you able to afford your own iPad? Because if so, then we're not going to provide one to you. There's a lot of things that go along in the school day that are just universally provided, regardless of household income. And we need to get to a place where meals are seen that way as well. Next. And my final point is that really school cafeterias should not be stigmatizing. There are so many things that kids need to deal with that going through the lunch line really does not need to be an upsetting experience for anybody. This can be a place where we can build community, introduce kids to new foods, promote healthy eating. This can be a happy place, and it doesn't need to be a place where there's any stigma about eating school meals or not. And when kids from all income levels are just encouraged and it's available for them to eat, that can go a long way in helping kids who are coming from households where they really count on these meals to feel even better about participating. So that is the end of my list of all of the benefits and reasons and messages that we share about why Healthy School Meals for All is important. But I would invite you to put in the chat anything that you think that I missed, because I can look through this later and then add them to my slides next time I do a presentation like this. So please feel free to put in the chat any reason that I have not covered that you think school meals should be free for all students. And so I will go on to say that this is not a new issue. If you have ever read Dr. Janet Poppendick's book, Free for All, Fixing School Food in America, it's a history of school nutrition in the US. And in that book, she references that there have been calls for free school meals since at least the 1940s. People have dedicated their careers to trying to make meals free for all, only to end up retiring without seeing it become a reality. So it's pretty exciting to be a part of this moment in time where there's so much energy around Healthy School Meals for All. And one of the big drivers in this shift in what is possible was the pandemic. COVID-19 really highlighted the critical role that school meals play for children. And when we were able to provide free school meals for all students during the pandemic, it really served as a trial run for what a nationwide free school meals for all policy could look like. And free meals were available to all kids for a little over 2 school years. Next. So now let's take a look at state and federal legislation, what has passed and what is pending. And also a look at how Healthy School Meals for All policies can come to be. And I really see 3 main pathways. The first is federal legislation. So that would mean that Congress would pass a law that would go into effect, and all schools across the country would be able to serve free school meals for all. I'll talk more in detail about that later, but the place where there is the most momentum right now is around path 2, which is state legislation. And that is every individual state passing their own legislation to provide free meals at school. And then the third pathway is to incrementally expand the existing model that we have to include more kids eating for free and keep growing that group until eventually we're at 100%. Next. So like I said, state action is absolutely leading the way. I love looking at this map because if you would have looked at it at the beginning of 2020, there would have been nothing going on in terms of this issue. And now there is so much going on. And we keep this map updated and available at freeschoolmealsforall.org if you ever want to check in on the status of your state or trends across the country. So let me walk through the color coding here. So the first states to pass Healthy School Meals for All state legislation were California and Maine. They did it within a few days of each other. And what is really cool is that you have California on the West Coast, a huge state passing this. And then on the East Coast, you also have Maine, a smaller state doing it. And to me, right out of the gate, it showed this is a policy that can work anywhere. So those were the first 2. Next, the next group of states to follow included Colorado, Minnesota, New Mexico, Vermont, and Massachusetts. They're in the blue stripe. And then we have Nevada in orange because they have been using COVID funds for 2 years, last school year and this school year, to provide meals free for all students. And then in green, we have all the states that have introduced legislation on this topic or have strong coalitions formed. And the progress in those states really varies. Some of them have really strong campaigns. In other states, legislators introduced a bill, but it didn't go very far. But just to take a look at all of those green states and know that there is at least some level of interest or movement on this issue, I think is really encouraging. And I really enjoy including these two photos when I do presentations because they are of the governors signing Healthy School Meals for All legislation into law in Minnesota and in New Mexico. And I just think that these photos convey kind of the energy and excitement and hope that surrounds this issue. And we'll go to the next slide. This is also an issue that enjoys a lot of public support. 2 years ago, FRAC did some nationwide polling and found that 63% of voters support legislation that would make free school meals permanently available to all students. And since we did our poll, there have been states that have done state-specific polling, and they have found numbers either around 63% or even higher. Here's an example from North Carolina, where 81% of North Carolina voters support making school meals free for all children. Next. So I wanted to focus next on some of the ways that these policies are being framed and messaged. And here, this is an opinion piece that the Lieutenant Governor in Minnesota published at the start of this school year. And she is someone who experienced food insecurity as a child. She has memories of her mom skipping meals so that she could eat. And she wrote, "For the first time in our state's history, students in Minnesota will have access to free breakfast and lunch every day at school. No questions asked, we're just feeding the kids. Watching the governor sign this into law this spring was one of the proudest moments of my career. Free school meals is just one way we're striving to lower costs for families across Minnesota." And it's the lowering costs for families that I think is a message that resonates with a lot of people. Another example is, this is also from Minnesota, where the legislation was referred to as a lunchbox tax cut. From New Mexico, the governor posted, "Feeding our kids is feeding our future, and we are investing." And I really like the use of the word investing and investment because at FRAC, we try not to talk about what the cost of this legislation would be, but rather that this is an investment in kids' health and in education. Here's a headline from Massachusetts: "Food is the biggest expense. Massachusetts families welcome permanent free school meals for students." And then this was an opinion piece from North Dakota. It said, "If we really want to deliver relief to working families, stop charging them for school lunches." And there's a quote that says, "As a father of 2 school-age children, I pay more for school lunches than I do in state income taxes. If you wanted to deliver relief to families like mine, why not cover the cost of school lunches?" And so this relief to families and to working families, and particularly at a time when food costs are so high for everyone, I think this is framing that resonates with people. Those were some of the messages that I have seen and liked, but I wanted to invite you in the chat to write down anything that you've been seeing in your community or that you think would work in your community. Because again, I would love to look through that later today and be able to pull ideas from this group. All right, next, you've likely seen headlines in the media that are just really supportive of this issue. Here are a couple of that I like. "School meals should remain free for all children today and always." This was back during the pandemic, at the height of the pandemic, when meals were still free for all students. "Free school meals, when the feds step back, states step up." And that's in reference to all of the state legislation that has been passing. And then states are fighting to bring back free school meals. So how do these free school meals bills get passed? Well, so far we've seen a couple of different ways. One path is for a standalone bill to pass. That's what Minnesota did. Sometimes they pass as part of larger budget bills. That's what happened in California. And in some states, with unique circumstances, a ballot measure would be the appropriate way to go. And Colorado proved that that is possible. They were the first state to pass Healthy School Meals for All through a ballot initiative. So what are the main components of this legislation? Well, at its core, it is dedicating state funding to cover the cost between federal reimbursements that already exist and the cost of providing free school meals to all students. So students that are in the reduced priced or paid category, it's providing state funding to cover those costs. We have seen in the states that have passed legislation so far some other innovative components. Some states have dedicated funding for staff training, equipment, local food procurement, school nutrition staff wages, evaluation, etc. And as the next cohort of states start passing legislation, I think we will add to this list of what goes along to support strong, healthy school meals for all legislation and to support implementation. All right, this is a little slogan I put together. Red, purple, blue, healthy school meals for all is for you. And the idea here is that I think sometimes people think that this is a policy option only for Democratic Party states. And in some cases that is true. The policy in California passed with Democratic leadership. In Minnesota, their bill passed when the governor's office, the House and the Senate were all led by Democrats. It is true that this has passed in blue states. But when we talk about healthy school meals for all policies, we're talking about reducing childhood food insecurity and supporting learning at schools. And I don't think any political party or affiliation has the corner on that. That is something that we can all be supportive of. So if we go to the next slide, I just wanted to reference some indicators that I think are showing what is possible. So healthy school meals for all policies have in some situations passed with bipartisan support. Maine is an example of that. Bills are being positioned as tax breaks for working class families, as I showed with some of the headlines earlier. Red states like North Dakota are passing legislation that are getting them closer to free school meals for all. For example, last legislative session, they passed bills to prohibit lunch shaming and also to expand the category of students that are eligible for free meals to 200% of the federal poverty line, which is growing the number of students that get free meals. Those are steps in the right direction towards healthy school meals for all. And individual legislators in red and purple states are introducing healthy school meals for all bills. So I think it is really important that all of us here today are seeing this as a solution for all states in all political landscapes and keeping the focus on what is important, and that is what this does to support students, families, and schools. All right, so now let's look at the federal landscape. So if we wanted to provide free school meals nationwide, that would require an act of Congress. And so some legislation to that effect has been introduced. Representative Omar and Senator Sanders have introduced the Universal School Meals Program Act. It does a lot of great things, and one of them is to provide free school meals to all students. And this is a big vision bill, and FRAC and many others are supportive of this. And this is the type of legislation that would be needed to have this pass nationwide. FRAC is incredibly proud to convene the National Healthy School Meals for All Coalition, which currently has 18 national organization members. You can see all of their logos here. They represent unions, school nutrition, parents groups, health groups, child advocacy groups, moms groups, really people coming from a lot of different perspectives that all understand how important free school meals are. And if we go to the next slide, I will show you the 4 bills that this coalition is supporting. The first is the Universal School Meals Program Act, which I just referenced. Another one is the School Meals Expansion Act that would expand the community eligibility provision and dedicate more money for it. And for those of you who are not familiar with the community eligibility provision, or CEP, is the abbreviation for it. That currently in our current system allows schools in high poverty areas to serve free meals to all of their kids. So this would be expanding that program. We also support No Hungry Kids in School Act. That would create an option for statewide community eligibility, and expanding access to School Meals Act, which would increase the free school meal eligibility to 200% and also increase funding for CEP. Next. So if you are looking for a reference sheet on those bills, we have one at Free School Meals for All. Down under resources, we have a link to this one pager that talks about all those 4 pieces of legislation. And while we are working hard at the federal level on this topic, along with partners, it is going to take some steady steps to keep working on this. And I think more states will pass state healthy school meals for all policies before this passes at the federal level. Next. All right, so if you were looking at the map earlier and saw that your state did not have any color on it and you're interested in starting a campaign, here are a few things to get you started with that. First, you want to create a coalition. And as I said with one of the earlier slides, this is an issue that just seems to naturally bring a lot of people together. And if you go to freeschoolmealsforall.org, we link to the state campaigns that we have seen. And there's so many now that we have divided them into past campaigns and ones that are active. So you can get a link directly to those state campaigns and see the different types of groups that are associated with them. And if you get a coalition started in your state, we would love to add your link to this website as well. Next. If we go to the next slide, you will see that the next step is to identify a legislative champion, and that is someone who would introduce a Healthy School Meals for All bill and be a real supporter of it inside the Capitol. And I wanted to call out two legislative champions. One, Senator Skinner from California, was a leader on this issue and helped make that bill a reality in California. And then also Representative Shelton in Wisconsin, who has introduced legislation and it has not passed yet, but is a huge advocate for this issue. Next, you're going to want to raise awareness around this issue. And here are just some of the tactics that we've seen be successful. Publish letters to the editor. I did one in my own community paper. Have events, do presentations on the topic, sign on letters, meet with legislators, invite legislators to visit school meal programs. The list goes on, which is why on the next slide, I say, if you are interested in starting a campaign in your state, let's talk more, because we would love to talk to you more about what this could look like, and then also connect you to campaign leaders in other states that can give you even more insights on how to get started. Next. So now I wanted to talk about implementation. And it's a really exciting time because we're starting to see how these policies are being implemented in states. And if we go to the next slide and we look at where these learnings are coming from, we know that Healthy School Meals for All policies have been implemented in California, Maine, Colorado, Minnesota, New Mexico, Vermont, Michigan, Massachusetts. Then 2 years of covering this in Nevada, and then also the community eligibility provision schools that I talked about, who in high poverty areas are implementing school meals for all, even if they're not a part of a statewide policy. So that's where these lessons are coming from. Next. And when we think about learnings about implementation for Healthy School Meals for All, I kind of divide them into 3 buckets. The first is the vast majority of practices from meal operations from the free, reduced price, and paid system continue to work for Healthy School Meals for All. It's not really like we're reinventing school cafeterias or how this all works. But the second bucket is emerging tips, ideas, and best practices for when schools do have Healthy School Meals for All policies in place. And a lot of those ideas have come from pandemic operations, community eligibility provision schools, and the first few years of Healthy School Meals for All policies in states. And then there's also this third bucket of system-wide needs that do need to be identified and addressed, because as we change the way that school meal operations work, there are some related factors that need to change as well. So let's get into it with the next slide. So the first thing is student participation. Student participation is likely to increase, which is great, when meals are free to all. So for schools looking at their participation when they had the seamless summer option in school year 2021 to 2022, which allowed them to serve all meals for free to all students, may be a good indicator of what participation would look like if they had a Healthy School Meals for All policy. And in community eligibility provision schools, they're likely not to see much participation because they're already offering the meals for free. Next. In terms of meal service, I think when all the meals are free, it really lends itself well to innovative service models. Examples of that can be breakfast in the classroom, hallway kiosks, meal vending machines, and more. And if you work in school nutrition and have additional thoughts on this, I would welcome you to put them in the chat. Next. Menus and meal quality. So you definitely want to consider menu items that maximize participation always, and higher participation can allow for an economy of scale in schools that allows for more fresh produce and more appealing menu items, and that benefits everybody. At the same time, it can also increase meal volume, which may require additional storage space or equipment. Next. Staffing. So labor shortages continue to be an issue in many areas and in many professions. And with higher student participation, that may lead to more hours for existing staff, the need for additional staff, or innovative staffing models like moving staff to different schools throughout the day. Next. Here is something that I call the I just want the milk issue. And that is that with the idea of all the meals being free, that it's hard for families to understand why, if they send their kid to school with a packed lunch and they say to their child, the meals are free, why don't you just go grab milk from the line? That does intuitively make a lot of sense. However, what is being served is a full reimbursable meal, not just kind of like picking and choosing from the line. And so there's a matter of communicating to families that what is free is the free reimbursable meal packaged together, not individual items. And FRAC has started to talk to state agencies and to USDA about the idea of having offering and properly marketing a 3-component meal, probably the milk, the vegetable, and the fruit, that could be a standalone meal or could supplement meals that are being sent from home. And one state so far, Minnesota, they've passed a Healthy School Meals for All policy, and now they're going back to pass legislation, hopefully, that would allow for kids to just pick up a milk and have that be covered with state funding. So next. And then there's the issue of maximizing federal reimbursements. So some state legislation has required or encouraged schools to participate in the community eligibility provision or provision 2. And determining student eligibility through forms or direct certification will continue to be important even as Healthy School Meals for All policies pass. Next. There's also the issue of reframing the school meal form. And I pulled this from my daughter's school website. And it says students will receive 1 free breakfast and 1 free lunch each school day. However, it's critical that all families complete an application for educational benefits each school year. So some parents might be familiar with the school meals form, but here it's being repurposed as an application for education benefits. And they provide an online link. And then it was too much text for a slide, but the website goes on to share a list of probably like 20 or more items of things that students can qualify for based on their household income. And that could include free ACT testing, scholarships, to other things like museum discounts and other discounts in the community. So trying to encourage families to continue to submit household income information, even if the meals are free. Next. So a lot of the information and resources that we have on this issue are available at freeschoolmealsforall.org. And next. With that, we are set up to take 2 or 3 questions. So Steve, I can let you look through the Q&A, or I can, and we can see what questions we have.
Sure, I can come online. We've got one question in the Q&A as it stands. Colorado just started providing the free meals this school year, which is so exciting. However, we are hearing many youths' concerns about not having enough time to eat their meals due to the increasingly longer lunch lines. Are there any ways that other states implementing HSMFA policies have addressed this time to eat issue?
Yes, thank you for bringing up that topic, because that's great, because even though this webinar was focused on healthy school meals for all policies, once you pass a policy and once you've had a time to celebrate it, there's so many other things that we can do to support school meals and to troubleshoot existing problems. And one of the things I love about Healthy School Meals for All is once everybody is eating for free and the issue of access has been addressed, it opens up so much brain space for all of us to be thinking big about what this program could look like in terms of nutrition, meal quality and appeal, building positive community spaces and cafeterias, et cetera. But to get to your question, time to eat is being looked at in several states that have healthy school meals for all policies because of exactly what you're talking about. Participation increases, and so getting kids through the lines can be an issue. And so some of the ways to tackle that can be to pass legislation that requires there to be a certain amount of time dedicated to eating so that you can ensure that students have time to eat. So far, I have seen, I think 20 minutes 20 minutes for time to eat legislation passed, and possibly some 30-minute legislation either proposed or passed. I would have to look into it. So there could be a legislative solution. Other strategies can be opening more service lines, allowing students to eat more places than just the cafeteria, adding additional meal periods. For breakfast, there's a lot of different options, like you can eat in the cafeteria, you could eat in other spaces, you could grab breakfast after the bell has already started. There's lots of different models. And so I think time to eat is a story of success. There are so many students participating that now the time to eat has become a problem, and there are a lot of ways that we can address that too. Are there other questions, Steve?
Cool, thanks, Alexis. There is a request to add your contact information to the chat if people want to get in touch with you.
I am doing that right now, and I would love to be in touch with people. That's my email, and this is my name.
And if you have a question, please submit it through the, oh, here we go. Got some more. Thank you.
And I just want to say I've seen just the chat being full continuously over the last 30 minutes. And
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to reading through that afterwards, and maybe I can follow up on questions there too.
Okay, here's one. Well, I can answer this one. The webinar, yes, the webinar recording, we post it on YouTube and then send out the link and the slides along with additional resources in a follow-up email to everyone who registered. So if you registered, you're here, you should get that. Are there any federal efforts being made to increase the multiplier for the schools with ISPs of 62.5 or less that are falling in a coverage gap?
Yes, so legislation has been introduced that would change the multiplier from its current 1.6 to 2.5. And I can reference that legislation in the follow-up email. But many of you on this webinar are likely invested in the child nutrition programs. And so you may know that USDA recently put out a rule that lowered the threshold for schools to participate in community eligibility down from 40% to 25%. But what they didn't have the authority to do was to increase the multiplier, which is the way that more funding would have flown to schools. And that additional money really is critical for most schools who weren't currently participating to be able to participate. So increasing the multiplier and thus the money going to schools is critical, and legislation has been introduced to do that, but it has not passed yet. And then I see a question from Kim in the chat. Are there initiatives underway to measure healthy school meals for all impact on childhood hunger in states? And that could help in future areas. And when California passed their Healthy School Meals for All policy, they dedicated some money for evaluation. So I know that is underway. Also, FRAC later this year will be putting out our first Healthy School Meals for All report, which will be a look at participation in the states that have healthy school meals policies versus those that don't. And I think and also some lessons learned and insights on this topic. And so I think that will be the start of what you're talking about. But I think that this area is ripe for evaluation and studying of impacts. All right, Steve. Well, I think with that,
Yeah.
you can close it out, but I'm really grateful for everyone who joined today and look forward to looking through the chat and hopefully being in touch with some of you who joined today. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Be sure to visit freeschoolmealsforall.org, where all this information and more can be found. We've got some great webinars coming up before the end of the year, one on SNAP and one on summer EBT, which is getting kick-started. So go to frac.org/events to find out more about those. But we wish you a great afternoon, and thanks for coming.